Good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We're very honored to have a very special guest all the way from Israel, Rabbi Moshe Rothchild, founder of the Israel Alliance, who currently lives in Efrat, but originally from the United States. He had a rabbinic pulpit here in Florida, South Florida, as well as served as a rabbi in Australia. And we've gotten to know Moshe from our trips to Israel as a shul. He was our tour guide and such a great knowledge of Eretz Yisrael and the land of our forefathers. So I just want to give a warm welcome to our special guest, Moshe, for joining us tonight.
Great. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. I have great memories of those Israel trips. And also, we were together when you brought your son to Israel, and we went to the tefillin factory together.
That's right. In Hebron. One quick story about that. I mentioned in his bar mitzvah. Now he's, the ripe old age of 18 already. But,
wow.
We went to the tefillin factory in Hebron because we wanted to go to the oldest place, Jewish city in the world, to get his tefillin, the most authentic place. And after I got home, I looked at the tefillin bag, not the tefillin, of course, the tefillin bag that said "Made in China."
But no. It's good that you clarified that it wasn't the tefillin made.
It wasn't the tefillin. But you took us around to Hebron, and we saw so many special people and special places in Hebron. I have such fond memories of my son with you and with our congregation with you, and just so. But we want to talk about we're in a very difficult situation as a Jewish people. The people of Israel are in crisis, and it's a great challenge. And I feel that us here in the United States, we're not necessarily understanding the situation as well as we can. Most of us get our news feed from different media sources, and sometimes it takes a perspective from somebody living and breathing on the ground to kind of give us a little more clarity. And that's why I appreciate you spending the time with us. I just kind of wanted to go straight to the, important question that some of us are asking, consciously or subconsciously, ever since the horrific attacks took place on Simchas Torah, and that is, what is the agenda of Hamas? What is their agenda, and why are they fighting Israel?
Well, Hamas's agenda is no secret, because Hamas in the 1990s came out with their charter, and their charter says basically that their goal is twofold. And we will take them at their word for it. Number one is to eliminate Israel, to wipe Israel off the map. And the second is to establish what they call Palestine as an Islamic country under full Islamic Sharia law. And their interpretation of Islam obviously allows for the killing of innocent people, of women, men, and children, and they've turned to terror as the means to achieve that goal. And the problem here in Israel is, you can sum it up in one sentence: they don't want us here, and we're not going. So, that's what it comes down to. And I have a son now in the army. My son is in the army. And they're calling it the Black Sabbath, Shabbat HaShachor, Shabbat Shchora, the October 7th, is Israel's 9/11, and maybe we underestimated Hamas's desire, like their charter says, to wipe Israel off the map, and we were just stunned by the events of the day.
I feel like so many times in our history, people have said, things about us that they want to get rid of us. And we've said, oh, they're crazy. We didn't necessarily take it seriously.
Right.
Do you feel like, in a sense, that was somewhat of a thought in terms of Hamas? They're just crazy, but there's no way they can, wipe us out.
Well, Hamas they don't have tanks. They don't have planes. They don't have a regular army. And I don't think that right now Israel feels that Hamas, or ever has been, like an existential threat. they're a threat to Israel, and we had to be vigilant. And in 2005, we disengaged, and there's not a single Jew living in Gaza. And they showed their true colors because there wasn't a single Jew living there, and yet they continued to fire rockets into civilian populations. And but nevertheless, we underestimated them. Even though they don't have a standing army per se, no planes, no tanks, no artillery, but I mean, we underestimated them, and that's why people are comparing this to the Yom Kippur War, where we underestimated the Egyptians. But I don't think that's the right comparison. I think the comparison, though, is more to the War of Independence, where in the War of Independence we were trying to establish ourselves as a state and our identity, and I think there was an existential threat then. It's not that there's an existential threat now, but I think what's happening on the heels of all this is there is some level of clarification, or maybe there will be greater clarity as to who we are as a people. Not just for Israeli Jews. I'm talking about American Jews also, and Jews all over the diaspora. What I'm seeing is, people aren't joking about these things. Whenever there's a flare up, you go to your Facebook page, your social media, people make, all kinds of jokes, and it's funny. But here, because so many people died, right? So many people died in one day. People are really looking inwards, and we're seeing extraordinary things happening on all sides, all parts of the Jewish world. Here in Israel, I don't know the level of knowledge of your listeners, but there's a segment of the population called the Haredim. Okay, maybe you call them black hatters, whatever. And generally speaking, there's a lot of tension between that community and, say, the secular community. But what we've seen is the bridges have been built and walls have come down between these communities. And it's just extraordinary. One cute little story I heard is this on an army base. Sometimes there's a few women on say a predominantly all male base, and the mother said to her daughter, who's a religious girl, so when you go to base, maybe you'll find a nice boy. And she said, well, Mom, I don't really know who the religious boys are anymore. Everyone's wearing a yarmulke and tzitzis, on the base. And it's something that, the demand for tzitzis has just, it's through the roof. They're tying the tzitzis day and night here in order to provide for the people. And it's just extraordinary. What's going on here, and the outpouring from the Jewish community in the United States in particular. That's the one I know, but it's really all over the world. It's not just we're sending some things and going on. No, it's like on everybody's mind 24/7, and it's you have to sort of look at that part of it too.
Absolutely. Just getting back to what you started earlier with, the charter of Hamas, as I'm sure there's supporters of Hamas here in the United States. Even in Jacksonville itself, there's been a couple of rallies, pro-Hamas rallies, unfortunately. And one of the chants are, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And you have, American college students chanting that, maybe other people are chanting that. What do they actually mean by that in terms of Jews in Israel?
So this is very important to understand. There's a term that the world uses called the West Bank. And if you know anything about Israel, that area that they call the West Bank is neither the western part of Israel, and nor is it a bank. It's actually meant to be from the perspective of standing in Jordan. If you're standing in the country of Jordan, looking from the east to the west, so you'll see a large section of Israel, right, west of the Jordan River, west of the banks of the Jordan River. So they call it the West Bank. And the Bible, the Tanakh, calls it Judea and Samaria, or Yudah v'Shomron. And so when they talk about Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, they're talking about from the river Jordan basically, which is today the eastern border of the state of Israel, and to the sea, meaning the Mediterranean Sea, which is our western border, which essentially means that there's going to be genocide. There'll be not a single Jew living in the land. And so that's the river they're talking about, the River Jordan. And it's not a two-state solution. It's not about living in peace. It's not about living side by side. It's not about coexistence. It's about the utter removal, the obliteration of the Jewish people from the land of Israel. And is just extraordinary, by the way, that these things are tolerated around the world. I want you to think for a second, replace the word Jew in any of these contexts, or Israeli, with African American, right? No one would tolerate that, but somehow the world has become very tolerant of the hatred of Jews and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just want to mention one thing anecdotal as a Floridian to a former Floridian. I'm not sure if you heard, but our Governor DeSantis, a strong supporter of Israel, recently issued an order to all the universities that they can't have, my understanding, chapters of SJP, Students of Justice for Palestine, on campus because they're Hamas affiliates, and that's one of the rhetoric they. And our governor is an outlier on the issue.
Right.
Everybody's, of course, into allowing this kind of hate to proliferate.
It really is just extraordinary, and you just have to sort of put things in other terms for it to to realize the absurdity of it. It's like when imagine in the middle of World War II, in the United States having rallies all across campuses in the United States supporting Nazis. It's just extraordinary that people will side with Hamas. And I can, even though I vehemently disagree, but I can understand when someone says, "Hey, we support the Palestinians," but how can they say that there's any element of support for Hamas after what they did? We're not even talking about political dispute. We're not even talking about quote unquote normal terrorism. We're talking about a level of depravity and evil. I'll tell you a story, Rabbi, that I've been very involved since it started. I don't know how much you know about it, but since it started, almost every single day I've traveled all around Israel bringing gear and necessary equipment and things that the soldiers are missing. I've been raising money, buying the stuff, delivering the stuff. And one of the days I met a fellow. I was near a town called Kiryat Gat, and he said to me, "Do you know, right now in Kiryat Gat, there's a family that's sitting Shiva. Their son was one of the first soldiers killed, and you might want to stop by." Now, it's not so comfortable, but you got to do what you got to do. So I stopped by. And there were not a lot of people there because it was a time where rockets were flying, so people were afraid to go out. There was maybe 7 or 8 people there. Normally, there would be hundreds. Whenever a soldier gets killed, God forbid, just strangers show up, hundreds, thousands. So I'm one of maybe 7, and she's surrounded by her friends, and they were very, very grateful. It was very obvious that I did not fit in. They were all friends, and I'm this, look, bottom line is I've been here 15 years, and I'm still very American, and I come in there, and the focus is on me, and she just tells this story that is just, I can't get it out of my mind. She says her son was in one of the 22 communities that was invaded by the Hamas, and he was a soldier. He was protecting the people. He got them into the safe room, and but he calls his mother and he's whispering to her, tells her what's going on, and then he hangs up. A few minutes later, she gets a text message from her son, so she opens her phone. But what's the text message? The terrorist had actually murdered her son, taken a picture, and sent it to the mother. So she thought it was from her son. She opens it up, and the last thing she sees, the image is her dead son. So this is a level of depravity that is only rivaled by what happened really in the Holocaust, and the fact that people say they can support this is just, it's beyond, you don't even know what to say. Like, what do you say to someone like that? So you're seeing that in Jacksonville too. I'm like surprised.
Yeah, not too many people, but
Yeah.
but the last two Shabbosos, I think there were rallies in Jacksonville called All Out for Gaza, and my understanding there was it's something to be very aware of. Let me ask you, pivot to something else. So Israel's now at war. Tzahal is, doing what they need to do. I understand that you're not official spokesman for the IDF, but from your perspective, I'm just going to ask the question this way, because I think there's been some sort of feeling over the years that Israel didn't finish the job. They had opportunities in the past to, really defeat the terrorists and Hamas, and they just let them survive. It seems this time there's a very strong resolve from the government, from the IDF, that this time they're not going to allow Hamas to survive. That being said, are there any things, roadblocks, either internal from Israel or external from outside, pressures from the world, that are going to potentially hold Israel back from achieving a resounding victory?
Right. I think anything less than the removal of Hamas, and certainly their part of the removal of Hamas is their ability to fire rockets and to act with aggression towards Israel. Anything less than that, we will consider this a failure. And Netanyahu always used the expression, "We're going to mow the lawn." Every couple of years we have to mow the lawn. But now we're talking about like uprooting the grass. It's a different kind of feeling here. And the question is the ground invasion, which seems inevitable. We're now like almost 3 weeks into this war. What is holding Netanyahu back from ordering the ground invasion, or our defense minister? And the longer we wait, the greater the external pressure is on Israel to cease fire and to stop, and maybe not get the job done. And I think your question is your observation is a very good one, because Israel depends very much on the United States and other Western powers. We don't make our own planes, we make our own tanks, but we need supplies, we need ammunition. And how much tolerance and patience is the world going to have as Israel is going house to house, door to door? So many will say that, they should have launched a ground invasion 2 weeks ago. What are they waiting for? And I'm very concerned that this delay is going to cause tremendous pressure on Israel. We already see it. And but we need to go full force, as Golda Meir once said, "I'd rather your condemnations than your condolences." And we got to get the job done, and that's it. And in a poll, 75% of Israelis are in full agreement that we need to just go until Hamas is no longer like the world did to ISIS.
Right. Let me ask you this. I mean, you quoted a poll, 75%, which seems like a very high number in Israel when everything is so divided. Again, I'm no military person, let alone an expert, but my understanding that with a ground invasion, the prospect of casualties on the Israeli side goes up significantly.
Yeah.
Are the Israeli population as a whole ready to embrace the ground invasion, considering that there's and you said yourself, you have a son. Is he you don't have to reveal where he's stationed, but I'm saying you're as a father that has a soldier in the IDF, you feel this is important to that he should go into a ground invasion.
So let me also just clarify. My son is not in a position where, and look, whenever you're in the army, you're in danger, even in peacetime. There are accidents and things. But my son is in the middle of he entered the army in August, so he's in the middle of basic training. He's not being sent into Gaza, so he playing now a supporting role, guarding and doing stuff and that the army has him doing. But the only way he would ever enter into Gaza if this lasted like a few more months. But at this point, it's not likely. But with that said, and I want to answer your question, but I want to also bring you all into the feeling. In my community here where I live, you go to shul, half the people are gone. They're all called up. Almost everybody I know are friends in our age group. They all have sons in the army, or daughters for that matter. And the tension is extraordinary. And there has to be this balance, and it's very hard to achieve, between the absolute sheer terror of having your son on those front lines that could go in any minute. And we all know that that however many go in, a lower number is coming out. And there's sheer terror. And a lot of people are literally have psychological breakdowns, just crying all day, and they can't deal with the uncertainty. And nevertheless, the polls are saying we need to go in. And it's not that people are naive. They know that the casualties are going to be high. And I think at some point, if we go in and the casualties start to mount, the polls will shift, and there'll be an outcry from the Israeli public to stop. We have experience with that in the Lebanon war and others. So, we just got to do a lot of davening, and all is good until the body bags start coming out. And I hate to be blunt like that, but it's in a very, very difficult time here, because we know what we have to do, but what we have to do means that there's going to be a lot of our kids in harm's way. Yeah,
for sure. Let me just say that I was going to mention this later, but we our shul, not just our shul, not just our community, but literally any shul, any community I know has just been wall to wall in terms of davening, support, on other ways, but just like it's top of mind. Obviously not in the same way as in a frat, for sure. We're not there, but it's so it's weighing very heavy on all of us. And when you talk about davening, that's front and center. Let me just pivot to one other thing, because that's something we hear in the media, at least here, all the time. We hear about the Gaza civilians. It's tragedy. I have a friend that sent me this meme that Gaza, they're running out of everything, running out of food, running out of water. The only thing they're not running out of is rockets. The most basic thing I must have heard almost every day, that the Gaza hospitals are just hours away from shutting down. Right. There's this humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and obviously we view every life as precious. But my question is why is that Israel's responsibility and not their government, Hamas's responsibility? And if you can just give us light on, and I just want to expand the question and just for a moment, like when in World War II, when the Allies were fighting back, did they, again, every life is precious, but was there so much consideration for civilians on the other side and on the enemy side, and how do we make sense of all that?
All right. So, what I can't take credit for this, but I was watching Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister here, and when he was on, I think, the BBC, they asked him about the mounting civilian casualties in Gaza, and he said to them, I forgot the exact line. He said to the guy who was interviewing, he says, "Are you crazy?" He said, when England was bombing Dresden in World War II, did anybody discuss what about the poor Germans in Dresden, and they have no power and no water, and because you were bombing the heck out of them, and that's, again, using those terms. Like in World War II, when the Americans were fighting the Japanese, did we dropping in Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Did anybody say, well, what about the poor civilians, and what about the water, and what about the food? They dropped a bomb that killed tens of thousands, and among those, most of them probably civilians. And Israel is held to a standard that no one is held to in this world. It's not that Israel wants to be held to a lower standard, but it's a basic standard that if you have a country that they elect a particular government, in my eyes, they're innocent civilians, but they elected these guys in there. Who put Hamas in power when the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas was controlling Gaza? They got thrown out of power, and the majority of the people elected Hamas, knowing full well who Hamas is, what they stand for. Now, of course, innocent people died, but you know what? That's war. And if you're gonna make that bed, you got to sleep in it. And as Israel does, we do our best to prevent civilian casualties. Unlike Hamas, we are not targeting civilians; we are targeting Hamas. And sadly, there's collateral damage. But don't confuse the rapist with the response to the rapist. And and the response. You got to do what you got to do to get the job done, to make sure the rapist doesn't rape again, that the murderer doesn't murder again. And you got to do whatever you need to do. And we have to protect ourselves. And while there might be people hungry and starving, but you know what? That's the reality of since 2005, 2006, when they elected them. That's the bed they made.
Very well said. Very well said. Let me just pivot to one other area, and that is, here in Jacksonville, in particular, but the United States in general, Jews were feeling, our hearts are very heavy, our minds are heavy, with the situation. Many of us feel helpless in a sense. What we can do, what is it in a material, actionable way? What can we do? So is there a message that you can send our community, in particular here in Jacksonville, but not only to listeners wherever we may have,
Sure.
that what can we actually do to help you?
So, I mean, there's quite a few things that people can do. And I think one of the things we have to sort of fight is, with the passage of time, we become numb to things. And that's not always a bad thing. When God created the world in a way that when you experience a loss, a tragedy over time, the intensity of it becomes less. But in this case, we have to sort of fight that, because things have not gotten back to normal here in Israel at all. In fact, they have gotten more intense as we're waiting for that ground war. And as I mentioned, all these parents with their kids sitting there. But what can people around the world do? There's a bunch of things. Number one, we're fighting a war in social media, as we always do, and constantly posting and sharing and whatever media platforms you use. That stuff is valuable. It's extremely valuable. Look, we are small in numbers, but social media, you can have a far greater effect than the small numbers that we might be. Now, number two is, of course, well, maybe I should have mentioned this first, is all the davening and the praying. We believe that there's something called emunah, which is faith in God, but also bitachon, and that is we have to have trust in God. It's not just simply I believe in God, but we have to say we have trust. And I was just teaching the book of Shoftim, where Gideon fights a war. He has 300 men against the Midianites. Hashem whittled down his troops, his forces, to 300 to demonstrate that Hashem is in charge. And we have to keep davening and storming the gates of heavens and telling Hashem we'll accept nothing less than a full redemption of the world. Maybe this is the Geula. We always have to think it is. And so we need to daven as hard as we can, with not just saying the words, but with great concentration and kavanah. And that is number two. The third thing, of course, is one thing the Jewish community is excellent at is mobilizing either goods to be sent to Israel, needed gear, or money to be sent for things that can be purchased. And the outpouring has been extraordinary. So that's the third thing. And a fourth thing, which is less common, but there are actually quite a few American Jews and non-Jews. I know someone from Ireland. He's flying in next week, to volunteer and to do what they can, and showing solidarity by coming. Believe it or not, and I know this might sound crazy, it's quite safe here. It's only near Gaza and near the border of Lebanon, but there have been I cannot think of one incident on the roads or anything like that. There's military all over the place, and it's quite safe here. So if anybody wants to fly in, spend a couple days, even just being here, there's so many volunteer opportunities because our soldiers all are out in the field, out in Gaza, wherever they are. So that would be something. It takes maybe a little bit more bravehearted, but there are people coming. So.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I have a few colleagues that have made some short visits and solidarity. I'm curious from
Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg's here now from Boca.
From Goldberg, yeah, Rabbi Elon Feldman from Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta, yeah.
So I'm curious from your side, the people in Eretz Yisrael, does that really touch them like in a
dramatically,
way?
Tremendously, it is a great feeling. And I want to tell you something also that my son, who's in the tanks, told me. He said, how like when you were, we moved to Israel, he was 4. And my older son was 6. He was little, but when things happen in Israel, you get the kids to write letters to the soldiers or to whatever, and a lot of the schools, the young kids do it, and they send them. He told me he was on his base, and they delivered all these letters from young American kids, and he said it made him feel so good. And the other soldiers, it made them feel great. And he said he felt like he was now on the other side of that. And he never thought those letters that he wrote when he was a kid, either when he was in America or even here in Israel, the kids write letters to the soldiers. He never thought, it's just a stupid little card. He says, but when we got those, wow, what a good feeling it made. So that's another thing, encouraging people to send notes and those things. When I've been delivering goods to the soldiers, I bring stacks of notes that the kids write here, and the soldiers love it. They love them. It's that feeling of that you're not alone. One of the worst things in the world is to feel that you're alone, and to feel that Jews around the world are there, behind, pushing with their hands, saying, we're supporting you, we're behind you. We may not be standing next to you, but spiritually we're behind you, and we appreciate what you do. And there's nothing like it. I mean,
thanks for the feedback. It's very important for us to hear how we can help out, davening, social media, with chesed, and also by in-person visits. So we it's good to hear the feedback for sure.
And just reaching out to people, it makes a difference that people are thinking about you.
Sure. Sure. Let me just, as we're winding down our conversation now, let me just ask you a little bit about the Israel Alliance. I know that you do so many things, but just tell us, if you can tell our listeners a little bit about the work you do in the Israel Alliance.
It's interesting, because had you asked me this 2.5 weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer. But a lot of things have changed. But for the last 2 years, we've been really focused on building bridges between Israel and essentially those who love her, and not distinguishing between Jew and non-Jew, but anyone who wants to support and connect to Israel. We saw ourselves as, sort of that bridge. And I was about to launch in Jerusalem before this started something called the Chesed Center, the Kindness Center, where we were going to be helping a lot of families, and it had some very, very unique things to it. And what's happened in the war now has sped that up for me extraordinarily. What we are planning to do now is to open this center and to really focus our efforts on families that have suffered dramatically from the war. I got a WhatsApp tonight from a woman. She's in charge. She's the leader of 60 people from a community in Gaza that's now in Neve Ilan, they were evacuated to this community, which is just outside Jerusalem. And she writes to me and says, we don't have jackets for the kids. We don't have jackets for the adults. And now it's starting to get cooler here. And we don't have money to do laundry even. They don't have they're out of their house. They're on some guest house. They don't have laundry. And then she writes something that's so sad. And she wrote, and the tired women need some makeup. And I think that was a little bit of a double entendre, not just simply the physical makeup, but they need like a makeover, like a spiritual, and they're suffering. So I wrote back to her. I said, I'm gonna come up there with a few people, and we're gonna sit down and we're gonna take a list of what you guys need. And so the Israel Alliance is now we're taking on as projects, and I think it's going to be sadly ongoing for many years. Some of these families, and to really look after them. But the last 2.5 weeks, we pivoted. Our sole focus has been on raising money from our followers, those who are part of us, sourcing the goods, getting them here, and delivering them to the soldiers. That is my full-time job. And through our Israel Alliance, we've been able to make a huge impact. We've delivered probably over 25 different items that have been requested by the soldiers, and we do that. One of the things that's very important, as a shul rabbi, I'm sure you've collected things and sent them. The most important thing is to actually find out what the soldiers need, as opposed to people sending what they think the soldiers need. Like, for example, they no longer need toiletries. The first few days they did. They don't. There are certain things they don't need, and people keep sending all kinds of stuff that they don't need. So the Israel Alliance has been focused. We have around 20 different army units that we're in touch with, and we get their needs and we fill those needs as they come in.
We're winding down now, but let me just ask you just a quick follow-up on that. Is the reason why they need basic supplies, is that because they called up so many reservists and they haven't been, the army doesn't have the wherewithal
people keep asking me that question because I keep posting how all these different items we're bringing. So there's a basic difference in the United States Army and Israel. When you go to the Army in the United States, it's a volunteer army. They give you everything you need. They give you your underwear, your socks, your deodorant, like everything you need. In Israel, when my son went into the army, we spent thousands of shekels on buying him things that he needed that the army they simply don't provide. Now, taking that, you're sitting in shul on Shabbos morning on Shmini Atzeret on Simchas Torah, you're called to the army. You don't go home and pack a suitcase. You have to immediately go to the nearest bus where they tell you to go, and they take you. Now, they stick you. Your army is not on a base. You're somewhere in the field. Now, you don't have access to a car. You don't have any underwear. You don't have socks. You don't have shampoo. You don't have anything. The army doesn't provide that, let alone real food. They give you what's called manot krav, which is like field rations. And guys were asking me for a shaver. They're going to be there for months, right? And so I went out and bought a shaver for $50, and they share it in the unit. Like one of those clippers, basic things like that the army doesn't. The army didn't give them tents. They didn't have enough tents. That's also related to what you were saying. The number of soldiers is unprecedented. And so the guys are sleeping in the rain. And we're not talking about 19-year-olds. We're talking about guys that are your age, my age, even a little bit younger, guys in their 30s, they're not 19. They're sleeping outside in the rain. So we went out, we bought hundreds of sleeping of tents and delivered them. Wow. The army just didn't have them, and some of the most basic things, and sleeping bags. They're literally sleeping on the dirt. Wow. The pictures are unbelievable. The army doesn't have 300,000 sleeping bags. They just don't have that. And so if it weren't for, private citizens, donating money, donating goods, we'd be in a far worse situation. And so I'm sure probably almost 100% of your listeners have donated money somewhere, and that money is being very well spent. I see it with my own eyes.
Yeah, just anecdotally, last week our teens in our community organized a strive of goods. They're working with a couple of organizations down there. Maybe we should add yours to the list, of course. And they drove down to South Florida. It was in total about 500 pounds, which was one pallet. And the organization in South Florida that's organizing the shipments, they had 100 pallets just last week that went out. So there's a lot of mobilization going on. But I'm happy to hear, not happy, but I think it's important for our listeners to know directly from you on the ground, like why this is so important and what this is accomplishing.
Right. If I can add one more thing, and I know we're winding down, is that the Dover Tzahal, which is the army spokesperson, gets up and says the army has everything they need. And what I've seen is that some of the donors say, hey, I don't need to give. The army spokesperson said everything. The army spokesperson is trying to raise morale. You don't want the army spokesperson to stand up and say, hey, guys, a lot of stuff, and do you mind giving us a few dollars so we can go buy it? That would not be very good for morale in the state of Israel. But everybody here knows all you need to do is ask any soldier, what are you missing? And you will get a laundry list. And so, you got to go with the organizations. Don't listen to the friends of the IDF who says they have everything, and the army, the official spokespeople, because they have to say that. But I'm telling you, if you know anyone in the army, ask them, what are they missing? And you'll get a list. And some of the stuff is more critical, some is less critical, but they're missing a lot of stuff. And the donations people are making, either of goods or funds, it is still as important today as it was 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for your time and your insights and your wisdom. And this is a very tough time for Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, the people living in Israel, Jews around the world. As I just want to convey to you in the most sincere way that we stand shoulder to shoulder with you. And morally, spiritually, emotionally. The only thing is not physically, but we're working on that. We're just continuing to pray, daven, and doing whatever else we can. And we're hoping, not just hoping, we're praying for a good outcome, and we should merit to be on the other side of this soon with a complete victory for the forces of light in the world, which what Israel represents.
Right. Amen. Amen.
Okay.
So, yeah. And we all have to remember that Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, there are no borders. Borders are artificial. And you need us and we need you. And the bottom line is that the only way we'll get through this is if we unite and get through this together, everybody doing whatever they can. The world doesn't need, that the whole world are doctors, the whole world are plumbers. You need plumbers, you need doctors. Everyone does their part. And we appreciate everything that the diaspora Jews are doing.
And we appreciate everything you're doing on the front line. So, Yasher Koach, Toda Rabah, and we'll be in touch for good things. And thank you so much for your time.
Yes, you're welcome.